reenactors on the Bloody Lane Trail don't break character, even when you ask them to move so you can pass. They're dressed in perfect Civil War uniforms, Union blue and Confederate gray, carrying authentic-looking rifles, marching in formation up and down the sunken road. I thought it was just really dedicated historical enthusiasts until I realized they were marching at 11 p.m., in the dark. With no lights, no modern equipment, no cars in the parking lot. Just soldiers, hundreds of them, marching in absolute silence except for the sound of their boots on the dirt. I tried to leave the trail, but one of them grabbed my arm. His hand was ice cold, and his uniform was soaking wet with something dark that wasn't water. "You're in the line now," he said, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Once you walk the lane during the hour, you join the regiment. We march every night from 11 to midnight. We've been marching since September 17th, 1862. And we're always looking for replacements. Some of us are starting to fade. We need fresh soldiers to keep the line going." He gestured behind me, and I saw them. Dozens of modern hikers in regular clothes, marching in formation with the soldiers, their faces blank, their eyes empty. A woman in yoga pants and a college hoodie. An elderly man still wearing his photography vest, his camera hanging forgotten against his chest. A teenage girl with headphones around her neck, no music playing, all of them moving in perfect lockstep, their feet lifting and falling in rhythm with the Phantom Regiment. And I looked down at my own hands and saw they were covered in mud and blood that wasn't there a minute ago. My legs started moving without my permission. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. The cold had spread from where the soldier touched me, creeping up my arm like frost on a windshield. I tried to stop walking, tried to dig my heels into the dirt, but my body wouldn't listen anymore. I'd become part of the formation, another replacement soldier in a war that should have ended 163 years ago. The soldier who grabbed me fell into step beside me. Up close, I could see the hole in his chest, where a bullet had torn through. Not a costume detail. An actual wound, dark and wet, with white ribs visible through the torn blue wool. He turned his head and looked at me, and his eyes were the same shade of gray as the morning fog that rolls across the Antietam battlefield every September. "You should have read the warnings," he said. "You should have stayed away on the anniversary." That's when I realized what day it was. September 17th. The bloodiest single day in American history. And I was marching with the dead. Let me back up to 2 p.m. that same day, when I still thought this would be a normal research trip. My name is Garrett Piper. I'm a graduate student at University of Maryland, working on my thesis about battlefield preservation. Antietam seemed like the perfect case study. Over 23,000 casualties in 12 hours of fighting. And the landscape looks almost identical to the photographs taken in 1862. The cornfields, the stone bridge, the sunken road that became known as Bloody Lane after Irish and Confederate soldiers stacked bodies like sandbags. I drove up from College Park that morning, took Route 65 through Sharpsburg, and arrived at the Battlefield Visitor Center just after lunch. The parking lot was nearly empty. September weekdays are quiet, the ranger at the desk told me. Most tourists come for the anniversary weekend events. "You doing the driving tour or hiking?" she asked. Her name tag read J.Lehman. Hiking. I want to walk the sunken road, get a feel for the terrain. Something shifted in her expression. "You planning to be off the trails before dark?" "Probably." "Why?" She pulled out a photocopied sheet from under the desk. "Park officially closes at sunset, but we don't patrol after 8 p.m. If you're going to be out there later, you should know about the local protocols." She slid the paper across to me. Hikers have reported some strange experiences on the bloody lane after hours. We're required to inform visitors. I picked up the sheet. The paper felt old, the text slightly faded like it had been copied from a copy too many times. At the top, in bold letters, Sunken Road Trail Safety Guidelines. Do not walk the Bloody Lane Trail between 11 p.m. and midnight. If you encounter reenactors after dark, do not engage with them or ask for directions. Stay on marked paths. The original trench lines are deeper than they appear. If you hear drum cadences or bugle calls after sunset, leave the trail immediately. Do not photograph the observation tower after 10 p.m. If someone in period uniform speaks to you, do not accept anything they offer. Should you find yourself surrounded by soldiers marching in formation, do not try to leave the road. Stand still and wait for them to pass. I read through the list twice. Is this serious? These sound like ghost stories. Park Service doesn't officially acknowledge anything supernatural, Ranger Lehman said carefully. But we've had 17 hikers go missing on this battlefield since 1960. 12 of them disappeared in September. All of them were last seen near the sunken road after 10 p.m. She leaned forward. 3 of those people were found the next morning, still walking the trail. They couldn't remember where they'd been all night. One of them insisted he'd been recruited into the 69th New York Infantry and had been drilling for hours. I didn't know what to say. Your choice whether to believe it. But I've worked here 6 years, and I won't go near that road after dark. Neither will anyone else who's been here long enough. She tapped the paper. Keep this with you. And seriously, be off that trail before 11 p.m. I folded the sheet and put it in my jacket pocket, already mentally categorizing it as local folklore. Good color for my thesis, maybe a footnote about how battlefields accumulate supernatural legends. I thanked her and headed outside. The afternoon sun made everything look peaceful. I walked past the Dunker Church, through the cornfield where the Iron Brigade made their stand, and finally down to the sunken road. It runs about half a mile, worn 3 feet deep into the earth by decades of wagon traffic before the battle. During the fighting, Confederate soldiers used it as a natural trench, firing up at the Union troops until enough bodies piled up to make a barricade. Standing there in daylight, it just looked like a hiking trail. Trees overhead, grass on both sides, a few interpretive signs explaining troop positions. Peaceful. Almost boring. I spent 3 hours taking photographs, measuring distances, marking GPS coordinates. The sun started dropping behind the tree line around 6 p.m. I should have left then. I should have hiked back to my car, driven to the hotel in Hagerstown, and come back tomorrow morning. But I wanted night shots. The observation tower lit up against the stars. The sunken road under moonlight. Images that would make my thesis presentation memorable. So I grabbed my camera and my flashlight and decided to wait for full darkness. I didn't look at that photocopied warning sheet again until it was already too late. Dusk at Antietam feels different than ordinary twilight. The light doesn't fade gradually. It seems to drain away, pulled down into the earth like the battlefield is drinking it. By 7:30 p.m., I was alone in the parking lot. My Honda sat under a flickering street lamp, the only car left. I walked back toward the sunken road, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since afternoon. My breath came out in small clouds. September in Maryland shouldn't be this cold, but I chalked it up to being near the Potomac River Valley. The first photograph I took was of the observation tower at 8:15 p.m. It's a stone structure built in 1896, standing about 40 feet tall on a hill overlooking the battlefield. I set up my tripod and took a long exposure, trying to capture the stars beginning to appear above it. When I reviewed the image on my camera screen, there were lights in the tower windows. I looked up. The tower was dark. Completely dark. No lights inside, no power lines running to it. The park service keeps it locked after hours. I took another photo. Same thing. Warm yellow light glowing from the observation deck windows, like someone had lit candles up there. But when I looked with my actual eyes, nothing. Just black stone against a darkening sky. My hands felt colder than they should. I checked my phone, 8:47 p.m., still over 2 hours before the danger window the ranger mentioned. I was fine. This was probably some kind of lens flare, or light reflecting off moisture in the air. I packed up my tripod and headed down the trail toward the sunken road proper. The path took me past the roulette farm, where doctors had set up field hospitals during the battle. The farmhouse stood off to my left, closed and dark, but I could smell something. Antiseptic and copper, like a hospital. And underneath that, something rotten and sweet. I walked faster. The sunken road runs north to south, with the observation tower at the northern end. I entered from the southern approach, where the modern trail meets the historical route. Trees on both sides, close enough that their branches formed a tunnel overhead. My flashlight beam seemed weaker here, like the darkness had more substance to work with. That's when I heard the first sounds. Not drums or bugles. The warning sheet had mentioned those specifically. This was quieter, softer, the sound of fabric moving, boots shuffling on dirt, and breathing. Dozens of people breathing in rhythm, like they were sleeping or meditating. I stopped walking, pointed my flashlight into the trees. Nothing there, just oak and maple trees, their leaves starting to turn for autumn. But the breathing continued, coming from all around me now, in front, behind, on both sides, like I was standing in the middle of an invisible crowd. Hello? My voice sounded wrong here, too loud and too small at the same time. The breathing stopped. I stood there for 30 seconds, listening to absolute silence. Even the insects had gone quiet. No crickets, no birds, no distant highway noise. Just me and my flashlight and the sunken road stretching away in both directions. Then footsteps, coming from the north, from deeper in the road. Heavy boots on packed earth, walking in perfect rhythm. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Multiple pairs of feet, all hitting the ground at exactly the same moment. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 9:23 p.m. Still not 11 p.m. The ranger said the dangerous hour was 11 p.m. to midnight. I had time, but my hand was shaking as I put the phone away. The footsteps got closer. I could see shapes now, moving in my flashlight beam. But they weren't solid, more like shadows that had learned to stand up and walk. Dark outlines of men in wide-brimmed hats, carrying long rifles, marching in formation down the center of the sunken road. I stepped to the side, pressing my back against the earthen wall, letting them pass. That was rule number 7, wasn't it? If you're surrounded by marching soldiers, don't try to leave. Stand still and let them pass. They marched by me. I counted them. 37 soldiers, all in similar uniforms, all moving in perfect synchronization. None of them turned to look at me. None of them acknowledged my presence at all. They just marched past, heading south toward the roulette farm. When the last one passed, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I heard a voice behind me. Terrible ground to fight on. Can't see more than 20 yards in any direction. I spun around. A man stood there, maybe 10 feet away. He wore a dark blue Union uniform with corporal stripes on the sleeves. His face looked young, maybe early 20s, with a thick beard and tired eyes. He carried a rifle musket, the kind with a wooden stock and a bayonet socket at the end of the barrel. "Don't mean to startle you," he said. He had a Pennsylvania accent, the vowels slightly flattened. "You look lost." Rule number 6. If someone in period uniform speaks to you, do not accept anything they offer. "I'm fine," I said, "just photographing the battlefield." "At night?" He tilted his head, studying me. "That's peculiar work. Most folks prefer daylight for such things. I needed specific lighting conditions." He shifted his rifle to his other shoulder. "You ought to leave before the marching hour begins. Once the regiments form up, it's harder to find your way out. The road gets confused after 11 p.m. "What do you mean, confused?" "Loops back on itself, turns around. Had a fellow last week walk north for 2 hours and end up south of where he started." The soldier gestured toward the northern end of the road. "You want out? You leave now. Take the eastern trail up past the observation point. Don't use the road itself." He was trying to help me, warning me, but he was also something that shouldn't exist, standing in a battlefield after dark, talking about regiments forming up like it was 1862. "I appreciate the advice," I said carefully, "but I'm going to finish my work." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or pity. "Then you'll want to know the formations," he said, "when they march. Which brigades hold which sections of the road, which colonels are still coherent enough to give orders, and which ones just scream." He reached into his jacket. "I have a roster here. If you—" "No." I stepped back. "Thank you, but no." He froze, his hand still inside his jacket. "You sure? It's dangerous to walk blind." "I'm sure." For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he withdrew his hand, empty, and nodded once. "Your choice, but don't say the 69th didn't warn you." He turned and walked into the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. I listened to his footsteps fade away, heading south after the other soldiers. I checked my phone again. 10:41 p.m. 19 minutes until 11 p.m. I should have run. Should have sprinted back to the parking lot, jumped in my car, and never come back. But I was a graduate student writing about battlefield preservation. This was data, evidence of something remarkable happening on this ground. So I stayed. And I waited for the marching hour to begin. If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. It helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. At exactly 11 p.m., the sunken road filled with soldiers, not gradually, not a few at a time. One moment I stood alone in the darkness, my flashlight the only illumination. The next moment, hundreds of men surrounded me, soldiers in blue and gray, packed shoulder to shoulder in the narrow road, their uniforms torn and stained, their faces pale as moonlight. My flashlight went out. Not the batteries dying, just gone. The light simply stopped existing. But I could still see. The soldiers gave off their own luminescence, a faint greenish glow like foxfire in a swamp. Enough to see their faces, their weapons, the holes in their bodies where bullets and bayonets had punched through. They stood frozen, arranged in formation. Union troops on the northern end, Confederate on the southern. Between them, maybe 40 yards of empty road. No man's land. Every single soldier faced forward, rifles at the ready, waiting for orders that should have come 163 years ago. Then drums started. not from any specific direction, just suddenly present in the air. A marching rhythm, steady and slow. And the soldiers began to move. The Confederate line advanced first, coming north up the sunken road. Their feet made that same synchronized sound I'd heard earlier. Left, right, left, right, left, right. 300 men moving as one organism. I pressed myself against the earthen wall, trying to become invisible. The corporal had told me to leave before this hour. Too late now. Way too late. The Confederate soldiers marched past me. I could see their faces clearly in that strange green light. Young faces mostly, farm boys and shopkeepers. One of them had no lower jaw, just a red mess of tissue and broken bone. Another had bayonet wounds stitched across his chest like buttons. They marched past, their eyes fixed straight ahead, and I realized none of them were breathing. Dead men. I was watching dead men march. The Union line advanced from the north. They met the Confederates in the middle of the road, and for a moment, everyone stopped. Silence fell across the battlefield. Even the drums went quiet. Then someone screamed, "Fire!" And the entire road erupted. Rifle shots cracked in the night. I saw muzzle flashes, smelled gunpowder and blood. Soldiers on both sides jerked and stumbled as bullets hit them, but they didn't fall. They'd already fallen once, back in 1862. They just staggered, reloaded, and fired again. The battle played out in compressed tone, everything happening faster than it should. Soldiers shooting, bayoneting, clubbing each other with rifle butts. Bodies piling up in the center of the road. Officers screaming orders. A Confederate flag falling, then rising again as someone else grabbed it. And then it stopped. The soldiers froze again, reset to their starting positions. Union north, Confederate south. The bodies disappeared. The drums started. They were going to do it again. Fight the same battle. Over and over, every night from 11 p.m. to midnight. I tried to move, tried to climb out of the sunken road, but my legs wouldn't work right. They felt heavy, disconnected, like I was trying to walk through water. I managed 2 steps toward the eastern trail before someone grabbed my arm. The hand was ice cold and wet. I turned and saw him. The soldier from the intro, the one with the hole in his chest. Up close, I could see he'd been shot through the lungs. The exit wound in his back was the size of a fist. His uniform was soaked through with something that looked black in the green light, but smelled like old copper. "You're in the line now," he said, his voice bubbling up from somewhere deep in his chest. "Once you walk the lane during the hour, you join the regiment." "No," I tried to pull away. His grip tightened. "We march every night from 11 to midnight. We've been marching since September 17th, 1862. He gestured with his free hand at the soldiers around us. "And we're always looking for replacements. Some of us are starting to fade. We need fresh soldiers to keep the line going." That's when I saw them. The modern people. They stood scattered throughout the formation, dressed in hiking clothes and jeans and sneakers. A woman in yoga pants and a college hoodie, marching with the 5th Maryland Infantry. An elderly man in a photography vest, his expensive camera hanging forgotten around his neck, standing at attention with the 69th New York. A teenage girl with earbuds dangling from her collar. No music playing, her face completely blank. 20, maybe 30 modern people, all of them moving in perfect rhythm with the dead soldiers. All of them with that same empty expression, like someone had scooped out everything that made them human and left just enough to march. "We were all hikers once," the soldier said. "Some of us died in the battle. Some of us died later, in hospitals or prisons, or just from infected wounds. But all of us ended up here, walking this road. and now you're one of us." I looked down at my hands. Mud covered them, and blood. Dark red blood that hadn't been there a minute ago, coating my palms and fingers like I'd been digging in slaughter. My legs started moving without my permission. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. I was marching. I joined the formation. The cold from where he touched me spread up my arm, into my shoulder, across my chest. It felt like ice water filling my lungs. I tried to stop, tried to dig my heels into the dirt, but my body wouldn't listen anymore. I'd become part of the regiment, another replacement soldier in a war that refused to end. The drums beat faster. The Confederate line advanced. We, the Union soldiers, because I was Union now, wearing their uniform somehow, carrying a rifle that hadn't existed a moment ago, we stood our ground and waited for them to get close enough to shoot. "Fire!" someone screamed. My finger pulled the trigger. I felt the rifle kick against my shoulder. Saw a Confederate soldier take the bullet in the throat. Watched him stumble, reload, and keep coming. We fought for what felt like hours. Loading, firing, loading, firing. The battle never ended, just kept looping. We'd fight until everyone lay dead in the road, then reset and do it again, and again, and again. I tried to count how many times we repeated the cycle, lost track after 8. Between battles, during the brief resets, I could think clearly again. That's when the horror really sank in. I was trapped here, trapped in this loop, fighting the same battle over and over, becoming more ghostly each time. I looked at the teenage girl during one reset. She stood 3 soldiers to my left, her face slack, her eyes focused on nothing. How long had she been here? Days? Weeks? Her skin had started taking on that same greenish glow as the original soldiers. She was fading, becoming more spirit than person. Was that going to happen to me? The soldier with the chest wound. I'd started thinking of him as my recruiter. Fell into step beside me during another reset. "You should have read the warnings," he said. "You should have stayed away on the anniversary." "What anniversary?" "September 17th. The bloodiest single day in American history. 23,000 casualties in 12 hours. 5,000 of them right here, in this road." He gestured at the soldiers around us. Every September 17th, the veil gets thinner. The battle becomes stronger. And if you're walking the lane during the marching hour on the anniversary night, you don't just watch the spirits, you become one. That's when I realized what day it was. I'd driven up from College Park on September 17th. Spent the afternoon photographing the battlefield on September 17th. Stayed after dark on September 17th. Today was the 163rd anniversary of the Battle of Antietam, and I was marching with the dead. The drums started again. The Confederate line advanced. I raised my rifle, my hands doing it automatically now, like the Ghost Regiment was teaching my body how to be a soldier. But this time, something was different. One of the Confederates broke formation. He walked straight toward me, ignoring the battle happening around him. The other soldiers marched through him like he wasn't there, but he kept coming. When he got close enough, I saw his face. He looked exactly like my grandfather. Same nose, same jaw, same deep-set eyes. But younger, maybe 25 years old, wearing a Confederate officer's uniform. "Garrett," he said. He knew my name. "You need to listen carefully. I can't hold this form much longer, but I've been trying to reach you. I'm your great-great-grandfather. I fought here. I died here. And I've been trapped in this march ever since." He grabbed my shoulders, and his touch felt different than the other spirits. Warmer, more solid. "There's a way out. but you have to find it before dawn, before you fade too far. Find the surrender documents, the real ones, preserved in the visitor center archives. Read them aloud at the center of the lane. That's the only thing that can end this. Then the drums got louder, and he flickered like a bad television signal. "Find the documents," he shouted as he faded. "End the battle. Free us all." And then he was gone, dissolved back into the regiment. The cycle reset again. We all moved back to our starting positions, but this time, I had hope. This time, I had a plan. Breaking free from the formation was like trying to swim through concrete. My body wanted to keep marching, wanted to stay in line, lift the rifle, fire on command. Every muscle had learned the rhythm of the regiment, and they fought against me when I tried to step out of formation. During the next battle cycle, I watched for my moment. The Confederate line charged. Union soldiers around me raised their rifles. I dropped mine. The rifle clattered on the ground, and immediately the soldier to my right, a man with half his face missing, turned to stare at me. His remaining eye was the color of old ice. "Pick it up," he said. "No. Pick. Bit. Up." The entire formation had stopped. Both sides, Union and Confederate, all standing frozen in mid-battle, all of them looking at me. Hundreds of dead faces turned in my direction. The drums went silent. "You can't break formation," the soldier with the chest wound said. He stepped out of the line, walking toward me. "No one breaks formation. Not until the hour ends. My great-great-grandfather told me there's a way out." "Thomas?" He tilted his head. "Thomas Piper?" "Yeah. He's been trying to warn off his descendants for years. Sent letters to his family during the war. Told them never to come here. But you came anyway, didn't you? On the anniversary. He said to find the surrender documents. Read them at the center of the lane." The soldier laughed, and it sounded like water gurgling in a drainpipe. "The visitor center is locked, sealed up tight, and you're stuck here until midnight. Even if you could break free, which you can't, you'd never make it there and back in time. I have to try." I ran, or tried to. My legs felt like they were moving through syrup, every step requiring enormous effort. Behind me, I heard the regiment reform. The drums started again. They were going to continue the battle with or without me. But I'd taken 5 steps away from the formation before the cold grabbed me again. Not the soldier this time. The road itself. The ground beneath my feet turned freezing, frost spreading up through my shoes. I looked down and saw ice forming on my legs, creeping up past my knees, locking my joints in place. "The lane doesn't let go easily," a voice said behind me. I turned my head, my legs couldn't move anymore, and saw the woman in yoga pants, the college student who'd been marching with the regiment. Up close, I could see her student ID clipped to her hoodie. University of Delaware. Her name was printed there, Emma Ridgway. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Don't know. Days, maybe?" Time gets weird during the marching hour. It all blurs together. She stepped closer, and I saw tears frozen on her cheeks. I tried to run too. First night. Got about 20 yards before the road pulled me back. It's getting harder to remember who I was before. "Do you remember how you got here?" "I was hiking. Training for a marathon. Saw the trail was open late. Figured I'd do some night running." Her voice cracked. "Didn't see the warnings. Didn't know about the rules. And then it was 11 p.m. and they were everywhere, and one of them grabbed my arm, and I've been marching ever since." The ice had reached my hips now. I could feel it spreading across my stomach, into my chest. Soon it would freeze my heart, and I'd become just another ghost in the regiment. "I need to get to the visitor center," I said. "There's a way to end this. To free everyone." "You really believe that?" "I have to." Emma looked back at the regiment. They were fighting again, shooting and stabbing and dying and resetting. The same cycle they'd been trapped in for 163 years. "If you break free," she said quietly, "take me with you. Please. I don't want to fade into nothing. I don't want to forget my name." She grabbed my hand. Hers was freezing cold, already halfway to becoming a spirit. But when our fingers touched, something shifted. The ice on my legs cracked. Not much, but enough. "Think warm thoughts," she said. "Think about being alive. Being human. It helps fight the cold." I thought about my apartment in College Park. My thesis notes scattered across the kitchen table. Coffee in the morning. Sunlight through the windows. My advisor's annoying habit of drinking tea during meetings. My sister's wedding next summer. Things I'd never experience again if I stayed here. The ice cracked more. My right leg came free, then my left. "Run!" Emma whispered. "Run now, before the road realizes what we're doing." We ran. The sunken road tried to hold us. The ground turned slippery, mud sucking at our shoes. Tree branches reached down, snagging our clothes. The earthen walls on both sides seemed to grow taller, blocking any escape route except straight back toward the regiment. Behind us, the drums got louder. Angrier. The regiment knew someone had broken formation. We burst out of the southern end of the sunken road and onto the main trail. The temperature immediately rose 20 degrees. I could breathe again without my lungs aching. But when I looked at Emma, she was fading. Her edges had gone translucent, like I could see through her to the trees beyond. "What's happening to you?" "Too far from the lane," she said. Her voice sounded distant, echoing. "We're tied to it now. Can't go too far, or we'll just disappear, dissolve into nothing." "How far can you go?" "Don't know. No one's ever tried before." We kept moving, jogging up the trail toward the visitor center. Emma grew more transparent with every step. By the time we reached the roulette farm, I could barely see her at all. "I can't go further," she gasped. "It's pulling me back." "Stay here. I'll get the documents and bring them to the lane. If you don't come back before midnight, I will. I promise." She nodded, then sank to the ground beside the farm fence. Almost invisible now, just a vague shimmer in the darkness. I left her there and ran for the visitor center. The parking lot was empty except for my car. The visitor center building loomed ahead, a modern structure with large windows and a peaked roof. All the lights were off. The doors were locked. I checked my phone. 11:37 p.m., 23 minutes to find a way inside, locate the surrender documents in the archives, and get back to the sunken road before midnight. Before the hour ended and the spirits retreated, and I lost my only chance to free them. I ran around to the back of the building, looking for another entrance. Found a service door near the loading area. Locked. I tried my student ID card in the magnetic reader. Sometimes those worked on old systems. Nothing. Then I remembered. I was still partially a ghost, still connected to the spirit realm. I put my hand on the door handle, and instead of metal, I felt something cold and yielding. My hand passed through the lock mechanism like it was made of smoke. I turned the handle from the inside and pushed. The door opened. The visitor center was dark inside, lit only by emergency exit signs and the green glow from security system panels. I pulled out my phone and used its flashlight to navigate. The main exhibit hall was full of display cases showing uniforms, weapons, photographs from the battle. I ran past them, looking for anything marked archives or research. Found it at the back of the building, a door labeled Staff Only, Archives and Preservation. This door was locked with a keypad. I tried my hand passing through metal trick again. It didn't work. The door was solid, real, anchored to this world in a way the service entrance wasn't. I checked my phone. 11:42 p.m. 18 minutes. I could break the glass panel next to the door, reach through and open it from the inside. But that would trigger the alarm system, and even if I got the documents, I'd be arrested before I could use them. Unless I was already a criminal, already breaking and entering. What did one more crime matter if it meant freeing 5,000 trapped souls? I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and smashed the glass panel. The alarm immediately started wailing, a piercing electronic shriek that echoed through the entire building. I reached through, unlocked the door from inside, and ran into the archives. Rows of filing cabinets and storage boxes stretched out before me, each one labeled with dates and document types. I scanned the labels frantically, looking for anything about September 17th, 1862, or the Battle of Antietam, or surrender terms. Found it near the back, a box labeled Antietam, Official Documents, 1862. I yanked it off the shelf, tore open the lid, and started going through the contents. Letters, reports, medical records, casualty lists. And there, near the bottom, Articles of Surrender, Confederate Forces at Antietam, September 18th, 1862. I grabbed the document. It was protected in a plastic sleeve, the paper inside yellowed and fragile. The words were written in careful copperplate handwriting. The ink faded to brown. My phone buzzed. 11:48 p.m. 12 minutes to get back to the sunken road. I ran out of the archives, through the visitor center, out the broken door. The alarm kept screaming behind me. In the distance, I heard sirens, police probably responding to the alarm. But I didn't care about the police. I cared about getting back before midnight, before the hour ended, and everyone trapped in the regiment had to wait another night for freedom. I sprinted across the parking lot, down the trail, past the roulette farm where Emma's ghost still waited. She was almost completely invisible now, just a faint outline against the fence posts. "Did you find it?" Her voice barely audible. "Got it. Come on." We ran together toward the sunken road, toward the sound of drums and rifle fire, toward the regiment of the damned, toward the only chance at freedom any of us had. When we reached the sunken road, the battle had intensified. The spirits were fighting faster now, more frantically, as if they sensed something was about to change. Union and Confederate soldiers crashed together in the center of the lane, bayonets flashing in that green ghost light. The sound was overwhelming. Rifle cracks, men screaming orders, bodies hitting the ground. Emma solidified the moment we crossed back into the lane. Color returned to her face, substance to her limbs. But she looked terrified. "They know," she said. "The regiment knows you have something. Look at them." She was right. Every soldier in the formation had turned to face us. The battle had frozen mid-swing, bayonets stopped inches from throats, rifles aimed but not firing. Hundreds of dead eyes stared at us with an intensity. The soldier with the chest wound stepped forward. The hole in his torso had gotten larger, like he was decaying even as a ghost. "What did you bring back?" His voice was different now, harder, less human. "The surrender documents. The official ones from September 18th, 1862. I held up the plastic-sleeved paper. "My great-great-grandfather said if I read them aloud at the center of the lane, the battle ends. You all get to stand down. Finally, rest." The soldier stared at the document for a long moment. Then he laughed, that same gurgling drain sound. "Thomas told you that?" Sweet, naive Thomas. He moved closer. "There's a reason we haven't done it ourselves, boy. A reason we stay trapped in this loop despite having access to every corner of this battlefield every single night. What reason? Because standing down means truly dying, dissolving, becoming nothing, and most of us are too afraid to face that final darkness." He gestured at the frozen soldiers around us. "We march because it's familiar, because it's something. Better to fight the same battle forever than to risk complete oblivion." I checked my phone. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes until midnight. 7 minutes until the marching hour ended and everyone reset for another night. "What if it's not oblivion?" I said. "What if standing down means finally getting to leave this place? Move on to wherever soldiers are supposed to go after they die?" Big assumption. Worth testing? The soldier looked at the regiment, then back at me. "If you read that document and nothing happens except we all dissolve into nothingness, their last moments of existence will be your fault. 5,000 souls, gone because you wanted to play hero. And if I don't read it, you all keep fighting forever. Keep trapping innocent hikers who break the rules. Keep fading until there's nothing left of you anyway." I pulled the document out of its protective sleeve. "At least this way, you get a choice." Emma touched my arm. "Read it. Please. Even if it means oblivion, that's better than this." The soldier studied her for a moment, seeing his own future written in her fading features. Then he stepped aside. "Read it then." But read it at the exact center of the lane. That's where the bloodiest fighting happened, where General Richardson fell, where the Irish Brigade made their stand. That's the heart of the trap. He pointed to a spot about 30 yards south, where the road dipped lowest. Bodies were stacked 3 deep there, in the frozen battle scene. Spirits caught mid-death, replaying their final moments. I walked toward the center, Emma beside me. The soldiers parted to let us through. As we passed, I saw their faces clearly. Some looked hopeful, others terrified. A few appeared resigned, like they'd long since accepted their eternal fate. We reached the center of the lane. The ground here felt different, softer, wetter, like the earth had never fully dried from all the blood spilled in 1862. I could feel it pulling at me, trying to drag me down into whatever dark place the spirits came from each night. "Hurry," Emma said. She was starting to flicker again, even here in the heart of the lane. "I don't have much time." I unfolded the surrender document. The paper was fragile, the ink barely legible in the ghost light, but I could make out the words well enough. "Articles of surrender," I read aloud. "Agreed upon between Major General George McClellan, commanding the Army of the Potomac, and General Robert E. Lee, commanding the Army of Northern Virginia, on this day, September 18th, 1862. The moment I spoke McClellan's name, the temperature dropped 30 degrees. Frost formed on the earthen walls. My breath came out in white clouds. The soldiers were listening. Every single one of them, Union and Confederate alike, had turned toward me. Waiting. I kept reading. Article 1. All Confederate forces shall cease hostilities and withdraw from Maryland territory by midnight, September 18th, 1862. A wind rose from nowhere, whipping through the sunken road. It smelled like gunpowder and old blood, and turned earth. Article 2. all wounded soldiers, regardless of allegiance, shall receive medical attention and humane treatment. The frozen battle scene began to move again, but differently this time. Not fighting, just slowly lowering their weapons. A Confederate soldier helped a wounded Union man sit down. 2 Union soldiers carefully laid a fallen Confederate officer on the ground. They were following the orders. After 163 years, they were finally following the surrender. Article 3. All deceased soldiers shall be accorded proper burial with full military honors. The bodies stacked in the center of the lane started glowing brighter. The wounds on the soldiers began to close, the blood to fade from their uniforms. They looked cleaner somehow. Less decayed, more like the young men they'd been before the battle destroyed them. My phone buzzed, 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes. I read faster. Article 4. This surrender is unconditional and final. All troops are hereby released from their duties, and they return to their homes. That last word, homes, hit like a physical blow. Several soldiers dropped to their knees. Others began crying, tears cutting clean paths through the dirt on their faces. A young Confederate boy, couldn't have been more than 16, looked up at the sky and whispered, "Tennessee. I can go home to Tennessee." Article 5. Let this document stand as official record that the Battle of Antietam has concluded. All participating forces are dismissed from service. The engagement is ended. The green light intensified, becoming almost blinding. The drums stopped. The entire battlefield went silent. Then, one by one, the soldiers began to salute. Unions saluted their officers. Confederates saluted theirs. Then they saluted each other, old enemies acknowledging old respect. The Confederate soldier who'd recruited me into the march, the one with the chest wound, walked over and extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was warm for the first time. Human. "Thank you," he said. His voice no longer sounded like drowning. My name was Patrick Donnelly, 69th New York Infantry. I've been trying to remember that for longer than I can calculate. Garrett Piper. I know. You look like Thomas. Got his stubborn streak, too. He smiled, and it was a genuine smile, not the dead grimace from before. Tell him I said goodbye, if you ever see him again. I will. Patrick turned to face the other soldiers. Company. Attention. Every soldier in the regiment snapped to attention. Perfect military posture, like they were back on the parade ground instead of trapped in a nightmare. We've been released from duty, Patrick called out. The battle is over. We can finally go home. A cheer rose from the regiment. Not a war cry, just pure relief and joy. Soldiers hugged each other. Some laughed, others sobbed. The centuries of accumulated trauma and exhaustion seemed to melt away, leaving just tired men who wanted rest. Emma stood beside me, tears streaming down her face. She was solid again, completely real, no longer fading. It worked, she whispered. You actually did it. My phone showed 11:59 p.m. 1 minute until midnight, until the marching hour ended. The soldiers began to disappear. Not all at once, gradually, peacefully, like snow melting in sunlight. They faded with smiles on their faces, relief in their eyes. Some waved goodbye, others simply closed their eyes and let go. Patrick was one of the last to fade. Before he disappeared completely, he saluted me one final time. Fair winds, Piper. You freed 5,000 souls tonight. That's worth remembering. Then he was gone. The sunken road emptied. The green light faded. The temperature rose back to normal September night air. Within 30 seconds, Emma and I stood alone on an ordinary hiking trail. No spirits in sight. I checked my phone. 12 a.m. Midnight. The marching hour had ended. Emma started laughing and crying at the same time. We're free. Actually free. I don't have to march anymore. I don't have to fight that same battle over and over. Can you leave the battlefield now? I think so. Let me try. She took a step away from the sunken road, then another. She didn't fade, didn't become transparent. She stayed solid and real. It worked! She grabbed my hands, spinning in a circle. I can leave. I can go home. That's when we heard sirens getting closer. The police, responding to the alarm I'd triggered at the visitor center. You should probably run, Emma said. I'll explain what happened. Tell them you saved someone's life tonight, which is technically true. They won't believe the ghost story. Then I'll make something up. Just go. You've done enough. I squeezed her hands once, then took off running toward my car. Behind me, I heard Emma calling out to the approaching police, her voice strong and clear and fully human. I made it to my Honda, started the engine, and drove out of the parking lot just as 2 state trooper cars pulled in. In my rearview mirror, I saw them stop near Emma. Saw her gesturing, explaining, being wonderfully, beautifully alive. I drove north on Route 65, leaving the battlefield behind. But something felt wrong. The surrender had worked. The soldiers were freed. Emma was alive. Everything should have been over. So why did I still feel that cold touch on my arm? Why could I still smell gunpowder? I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. They were still covered in mud and blood. The dashboard clock read 12:03 a.m. I'd been driving for 3 minutes, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, I could still see the Antietam observation tower in the distance. The road had looped back on itself. I was still in the battlefield's grip, and then I saw him, standing in the middle of Route 65. My great-great-grandfather Thomas, still in his Confederate uniform, still young and whole and undeniably dead. I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt inches from him. He walked around to my driver's side window. I rolled it down. You freed the Sunken Road Regiment, Thomas said. That was brave. Good. They deserved peace. But Antietam has more than one haunted location, more than one regiment trapped by the violence that happened here. He pointed west toward the Potomac River. The Sunken Road was just the beginning. What do you mean? There are 12 battle sites on this field. 12 places where the dead still walk. You freed one. He leaned closer, his eyes sad and ancient. Someone has to free the others. And now that you've started, now that you've proven it can be done, they'll all be looking for you. I can't. You're a piper. You're family. You're the only one who can walk between the worlds without losing yourself completely. He stepped back from the car. Go home for now. Rest. But you'll come back. They'll make sure of it. Then he was gone, dissolved into the night. I sat there in my car, hands shaking, the smell of gunpowder still thick in the air. The battlefield had let me go, but it wasn't done with me yet. I made it back to my apartment in College Park by 3 a.m. The drive took twice as long as it should have, because I kept seeing soldiers standing on the shoulder of Route 270, waiting for rides that would never come. My hands still had mud and blood caked under the fingernails. I went straight to the bathroom and scrubbed them in the sink. Hot water, dish soap, a nail brush I found under the cabinet. The water ran brown at first, then pink, then clear. But when I dried my hands on the towel, the stains were still there. Darker now, if anything. like the blood had soaked deeper into my skin instead of washing away. I tried again with bleach. The chemical smell burned my nostrils, made my eyes water. I scrubbed until my palms turned red and raw. The blood didn't budge. It wasn't coming off because it wasn't really there. Not physically. It was a mark, a brand, proof that I'd walked between the living and the dead and survived. Proof that the battlefield had claimed me. I gave up washing around 4 a.m. and collapsed on my bed, still wearing the clothes I'd hiked in. They smelled like gunpowder and turned earth. I should have showered, changed, done something normal to anchor myself back in the real world. Instead, I fell asleep and dreamed of marching. The dreams came every night after that. Always the same sequence, standing in formation, waiting for orders, the drums starting, the enemy line advancing, raising a rifle that felt too heavy and too light at the same time, pulling the trigger, watching men fall and rise and fall again in an endless loop. Sometimes I was Union, sometimes Confederate. The uniform changed, but the horror stayed constant. I'd wake up around 3 a.m., always 3 a.m., like my body had synchronized to battlefield time, drenched in sweat, my legs twitching like they wanted to march even in sleep. By the third night, I stopped trying to sleep at all. My thesis advisor noticed during our meeting on September 20th. "You look rough, Garrett," Professor Whitman said, peering at me over his reading glasses. "When's the last time you slept?" "I've been working." "On what?" "You were supposed to be gathering preliminary data at Antietam, not running yourself into the ground." I'd prepared a lie. Something about food poisoning from a bad sandwich in Sharpsburg, losing a couple days to being sick. But when I opened my mouth, the truth tried to come out instead. I got trapped in a ghost regiment. Had to free 5,000 Civil War soldiers by reading surrender documents at midnight. Now I'm marked and the battlefield won't let me go. I actually said it, out loud, in my advisor's office. Professor Whitman stared at me for a long moment. Then he closed my thesis folder and leaned forward. "Garrett, I'm going to say this as clearly as possible. You need to take some time off. See the campus health center. Talk to someone about what you're experiencing." "I'm not having a breakdown." "Then what are you having?" I looked down at my hands. The bloodstains were visible in the office's fluorescent lighting, dark crescents under each nail. But Professor Whitman wasn't looking at my hands. He was looking at my face, concern written across his features. He couldn't see the stains. Nobody could except me. "I'm just tired," I said finally. "You're right. I'll take a few days." I left his office and walked across campus in a daze. Students everywhere, laughing and complaining about exams and living their normal lives. None of them had blood on their hands. None of them heard drums in the distance. That night, I tried to work on my thesis. Opened my laptop. Pulled up my notes from before the trip. Everything I'd written about battlefield preservation seemed naive now. Disconnected from the reality of what actually lingered on those grounds. How do you preserve a battlefield when the battle never really ended? My phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Unknown number with a Maryland area code. I answered. "Garrett Piper?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes." "My name is Carol Zimmerman. I'm the head archivist at Antietam National Battlefield. You broke into our visitor center 4 nights ago." "I can explain." "I'm not calling to press charges. I'm calling because Emma Ridgway told me what really happened. What you did at the sunken road." A pause. I didn't believe her at first. But then I checked the archives. The surrender document you took, it's back in its box. Perfectly preserved, like it was never moved. And the broken glass in our door? It repaired itself overnight. Just sealed back together like it was never broken. I didn't know what to say. I've worked at this battlefield for 18 years, Carol continued. I've heard the stories. Seemed strange things after dark. But I always wrote them off as imagination or wind or deer moving through the trees. Now I'm not so sure. Another pause. Emma said you freed the Sunken Road Regiment. Is that true? Yes. Then you need to know something. The Sunken Road isn't the only haunted site here. There's Burnside Bridge, where the Union troops got pinned down for hours. The cornfield, where regiments dissolved in 15 minutes of fighting. The Dunker Church, where wounded soldiers crawled to die. Every major engagement site has spirits trapped there, reliving their deaths. My great-great-grandfather told me the same thing. Thomas Piper. Confederate, right? I have his service records. He was at both Sunken Road and Burnside Bridge before he died in the hospital at Shepherdstown. Her voice softened. He's been trying to protect his descendants for over a century, warning them away from the battlefield. But you came anyway. I didn't know. And now you're marked. Now they know you can free them. Papers rustled on her end. I'm looking at reports from 1960, when the first modern hiker disappeared. Then 1978. Then 1983. All of them were descendants of soldiers who fought at Antietam. All of them came to the battlefield on or near the anniversary. And all of them were found days later, confused and traumatized, talking about marching with the dead. What happened to them? Most recovered eventually, went back to their normal lives. But a few. She hesitated. A few kept coming back, like the battlefield was calling them. One man, David Richardson. His ancestor was General Richardson, who died at Sunken Road. He came back every September for 12 years. Said he could hear soldiers calling his name. On his 13th visit, he walked into the cornfield at midnight and never came back out. We found his car in the parking lot 3 days later. No body, no trace. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a choice. You can ignore the calling, go back to your normal life, and hope the connection fades over time. Some people manage it. Or another long pause. Or you can go back. Finish what you started. Free the other regiments like you freed Sunken Road. Give all those trapped souls the peace they've been denied. And if I go back, what happens to me? I don't know. Nobody's ever actually succeeded in freeing multiple sites before. You're the first person to figure out the surrender documents. The first one to break the cycle. She sighed. But I'll tell you this. If you don't go back, those soldiers will keep trying to reach you. They'll find ways into your dreams, your waking life, your every moment. The connection won't fade. It'll only get stronger, until you either give in or break completely. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling over me like a burial shroud. When should I come back? I asked. Not on the anniversary. The spirits are too strong then. You'll get trapped like you almost did at Sunken Road. Come on a regular night, when they're quieter. More willing to listen. A pause. Start with Burnside Bridge. That's where Thomas wants you to go next. He's been leaving signs. What kind of signs? Check your apartment. You'll see. She hung up. I put down my phone and looked around my apartment. Everything seemed normal at first. My thesis notes scattered across the kitchen table. Dirty dishes in the sink. Laundry piled on the couch. Then I saw them. Rocks. small stones arranged on my windowsill in a specific pattern. 3 stones forming a bridge shape, with a 4th stone placed just beyond them. I hadn't put them there, hadn't even noticed them until now. And on my bathroom mirror, written in the condensation from my earlier shower, still somehow visible hours later, Burnside. My hands started shaking. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a book on Antietam that I'd bought for research, flipped to the chapter about Burnside Bridge. The bookmark I'd left on a different page had moved itself to this chapter, and something, had circled a specific passage in pencil. The bridge became a killing ground. Confederate sharpshooters held the high ground on the western bank, picking off Union soldiers as they tried to cross the narrow stone bridge. Bodies piled in the creek below. For 3 hours, the 51st Pennsylvania and 51st New York trying to take the bridge and failed. When they finally succeeded, over 500 soldiers lay dead or dying in the water. Below that, in handwriting that looked like my grandfather's, that looked like the copperplate script from the surrender documents, someone had written, "They're still trying to cross. Help them." I looked at my hands. The bloodstains seemed darker tonight, spreading past my fingernails and onto my palms. By tomorrow, they'd probably reach my wrists, and the day after, my forearms. The mark was growing, claiming more of me with each passing hour. I had 2 choices: ignore it and watch myself slowly become a ghost, or go back to Antietam and face whatever waited at Burnside Bridge. The drums in my head got louder, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. I closed the book and started packing. I'd go back to Antietam tomorrow night. Find Burnside Bridge. See what Thomas wanted me to do there. But I wouldn't go during the danger hours. I'd learned that lesson at Sunken Road. I'd go at dusk. Give myself time to understand the situation before midnight, when the spirits were strongest. That was my plan anyway. I didn't know yet that Burnside Bridge operated on different rules, that the spirits there didn't wait for midnight to manifest. They came at dawn, and they weren't just marching, they were still fighting. I arrived at Burnside Bridge just before sunrise on September 22nd. The bridge is smaller than I expected. 3 stone arches spanning Antietam Creek, maybe 125 feet long. Georgian limestone, built in 1836, still solid after nearly 2 centuries. In the pre-dawn darkness, it looked peaceful. Just an old bridge over a quiet creek, surrounded by trees, starting to show autumn colors. I parked in the small lot and walked down to the water's edge. The creek moved slowly here, maybe 3 feet deep, narrow enough to wade across in 30 seconds. That's what made the battle so tragic. Union soldiers died by the hundreds trying to cross a bridge they could have simply walked around. But General Burnside had ordered them to take the bridge, so they tried, and tried, and died tried. I checked my phone. 6:14 a.m. Sunrise would come around 6:45. I had half an hour to figure out what Thomas wanted me to do here before the spirits manifested. The bloodstains on my hands had spread overnight, just like I'd feared. They now covered my palms completely and were creeping up my wrists. In the dim light, they looked almost black. I walked onto the bridge itself. My footsteps echoed on the stone. The water below reflected the gray pre-dawn sky, perfectly still except where a few leaves drifted on the surface. Then I noticed the bullet holes. They pockmarked the stone walls on both sides of the bridge, hundreds of them, clustered in specific patterns. This wasn't decay or natural erosion. These were impact marks from Minié balls, the conical bullets used in Civil War rifles. I ran my fingers over one. The stone was warm to the touch, like it still held the heat from the gunpowder explosion that had sent the bullet flying. A twig snapped behind me. I turned and saw Thomas standing at the eastern end of the bridge. He looked more solid today, less ghostly. Almost alive, except for the gray pallor of his skin and the way the growing light seemed to pass through him slightly. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. You left me rocks and messages. You didn't really give me a choice. I gave you plenty of choices. You made yours." He walked toward me, his boots making no sound on the stone. "This bridge is different from the sunken road. The spirits here aren't marching. They're still fighting. Actively, aggressively fighting. They don't reset and repeat. They're locked in one continuous battle that's been raging for 163 years without pause. How is that possible? The orders never got rescinded. General Burnside told the 51st Pennsylvania and 51st New York to take the bridge. They're still trying to take it, and the Confederates on the far ridge were told to hold it. They're still holding." Thomas pointed to the western bank, where tree-covered slopes rose steeply from the creek. "Up there, Georgian sharpshooters, 2nd and 20th Georgia Infantry. They've been firing down at the bridge since September 17th, 1862, and they've never stopped." As if summoned by his words, I heard a rifle crack. A bullet whistled past my head and struck the stone railing, throwing chips of limestone into the air. "Get down!" Thomas shouted. I dropped flat on the bridge, my heart hammering. Another shot. Another. The bullets came faster now, a steady drumbeat of rifle fire from the invisible ridge. "They can hit you," Thomas said, crouching beside me even though the bullets passed through his ghost form. "The bridge is the killing ground. Anyone on it during the battle becomes a target. I thought you'd be safer arriving before dawn, before they fully manifested, but..." He never finished the sentence. The sun broke over the eastern horizon, and suddenly the bridge was full of soldiers. Union troops materialized around me, packed shoulder to shoulder, trying to cross under withering fire. They wore the distinctive red diamond patches of the 9th Corps. Some carried rifles, others had nothing but bayonets. All of them were bleeding from multiple wounds that wouldn't stop flowing. A young soldier fell beside me, shot through the throat. He clawed at the wound, trying to stop the blood, then stood up and kept advancing. The wound was still there, the blood still pouring. But he couldn't die because he'd already died, and now he was trapped in the moment of his death forever. "Take it!" someone screamed in my ear. A hand grabbed my collar and yanked me to my feet. A Union officer, his face streaked with powder burns, his uniform torn and bloody. He thrust a rifle musket into my hands. "They're charging! Hold the line!" "I'm not..." "Hold the line, soldier." "That's an order." My hands closed around the rifle automatically. Muscle memory from the sunken road took over, even though I'd only spent an hour in that regiment. The weapon felt familiar, heavy and real and deadly. I looked toward the western bank. Confederate soldiers poured down the slope, hundreds of them, screaming that high-pitched rebel yell that made your bones vibrate. They came through the morning mist like demons, their gray uniforms dark with moisture and old blood, their bayonets catching the dawn light. "Fire!" the officer screamed. The Union soldiers around me raised their rifles and fired in a ragged volley. I didn't pull my trigger, couldn't. These were ghosts, spirits, trapped souls who deserved peace, not more violence. But the rifle in my hands disagreed. It fired on its own, the trigger pulling itself, my finger just along for the ride. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. I watched a Confederate soldier take the bullet in the chest and fall into the creek below. He stood up immediately, water streaming off him, the wound already there from before, and kept charging. "Reload!" the officer screamed. My hands moved without permission, going through the loading sequence. Tear the paper cartridge, pour the powder, ram the ball, cap the nipple, aim, fire. Another Confederate fell. Another rose. The charge kept coming. They reached the bridge. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted all around me, bayonets and rifle butts and fists. Men grappling on the stone, falling into the creek, drowning and undrowning and fighting again. The noise was overwhelming. Screaming, cursing, the wet sounds of metal punching through flesh. A Confederate soldier lunged at me with his bayonet. I blocked with my rifle, the blades scraping against each other. His face was inches from mine. He looked maybe 19, with a sparse beard and eyes that held nothing but exhausted fury. "Why won't you let us cross?" he screamed. "Why won't you just let us cross and end this? I'm trying to help you. Then get off the bridge." He shoved me backward. I stumbled, hit the stone railing, and almost went over into the creek. Another soldier grabbed me, steadied me. Union or Confederate, I couldn't tell anymore. They all looked the same in the chaos. The sun climbed higher. The fighting intensified. I realized with horror that this was just the beginning. Dawn at Burnside Bridge didn't last an hour like midnight at Sunken Road. The battle here had been going for 3 hours historically, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., which meant if these spirits were recreating their deaths, I'd be trapped in this fighting for 3 hours minimum, unless I could end it. "Where are the surrender documents?" I screamed at Thomas. He'd retreated to the eastern bank, watching the carnage with ancient sadness in his eyes. "There aren't any for this engagement," he called back. Burnside Bridge was never surrendered. The Confederates withdrew when they ran out of ammunition. There's no official order ending the fighting. Then how do I free them? "You have to make them stop shooting." The Georgians on the ridge, they're the key. If they stop firing, the Union troops can cross, and the battle ends naturally. How do I make them stop? Thomas didn't answer. He just pointed up the western slope, toward the invisible sharpshooters who'd been firing non-stop for 163 years. I'd have to climb that ridge, under fire, through Confederate lines, and somehow convince ghost soldiers to disobey their orders. A bullet grazed my arm, tearing through my jacket. The pain was real, sharp and burning and completely, undeniably real. I wasn't watching the spirits fight anymore. I was fighting with them, bleeding with them, dying with them. And if I didn't find a way to end this battle soon, I'd be trapped here forever. Just another ghost soldier trying to cross Burnside Bridge. The Confederate soldier who'd shoved me earlier appeared at my side again. This time he wasn't attacking. He was helping me reload my rifle, his hands guiding mine through the sequence. "You're the one who freed Sunken Road," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Can you free us too?" "I'm trying." "Then you need to climb that ridge. Find Colonel Benning. He's the one who won't let his boys stand down. Thinks if they stop shooting, the Union will overrun their position, and the Confederacy will fall." The soldier grimaced. "Someone needs to tell him the Confederacy already fell. 160 years ago. And we're all just ghosts fighting a war that ended before any of us were born." He pressed something into my hand. A piece of paper, yellowed and fragile. "My orders. From September 17th, 1862. Signed by General Toombs himself. It says to hold the bridge at all costs." He met my eyes. "Show it to Benning. Tell him the costs were paid. Tell him we held long enough. Tell him it's time to let the Union boys cross." Then he turned and ran back into the fighting, disappearing into the mass of struggling soldiers. I looked at the paper in my hand. It was real, solid, as authentic as the surrender documents had been at Sunken Road. This was how I'd end the battle. I just had to survive long enough to reach the ridge. Taking a breath, I started climbing. The climb up the western ridge took everything I had. Bullets whipped past me the entire way. Many A-balls punched into trees beside my head, showering me with bark fragments. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. The bloodstains on my hands had spread to my elbows now, dark and spreading like ink in water. But I kept climbing. At the top of the ridge, I found them. The 2nd Georgia Infantry, arranged behind trees and rocks in perfect defensive positions. They'd been firing down at the bridge for so long that their fingers had worn grooves into their rifle triggers. Some of them were nothing but skeletons in gray uniforms, still loading and shooting with bone fingers. Colonel Henry Benning stood in the center of his line, a massive man with a thick beard and eyes that burned with determination. He saw me coming and raised his pistol. "Union spy," he growled. "I'm here to deliver orders," I gasped, holding up the yellowed paper. Something in my voice made him pause. I walked forward slowly, hands raised, the orders held out like a white flag. "From General Toombs," I said. "September 17th, 1862. Benning took the paper with trembling hands, read it once, then again. His face crumbled. "Hold the bridge at all costs," he read aloud. "We held it. God help us, we held it." He looked at his men, the skeletons and spirits still firing at the bridge below. But what were the costs? How many boys did we lose? How many are still here, still fighting, still dying? "All of them," I said. "Every single one. They've been fighting for 163 years. But the war is over, Colonel. The Confederacy fell. The Union won. And both sides have been at peace for over a century, except here, except you." Benning stared at the paper for a long moment. Then he did something I didn't expect. He started crying. "Stand down," he whispered. Then louder, "Company! Cease fire." The rifles fell silent. One by one, the Georgian soldiers lowered their weapons. The skeletons stopped moving. The spirits turned toward their colonel, waiting for orders they'd been denied for a century and a half. "We held long enough," Benning said, his voice breaking. "We did our duty. We can rest now." The morning light changed, became warmer, softer. The soldiers began to fade, peaceful smiles on their faces. Colonel Benning saluted me once, then dissolved into golden light that drifted up through the trees like pollen. Down at the bridge, the Union soldiers had stopped fighting too. They were crossing now, finally crossing, walking over the stone arches without opposition. Some of them wept, others laughed. All of them looked relieved beyond measure. Thomas met me at the bottom of the ridge. He was fading too, becoming more transparent with each passing moment. "Two down," he said. "Turn to go. The cornfield, the Dunker Church, the East Woods, the West Woods, all of them waiting for you. I can't do this alone. You won't have to. Emma's been researching other battlefields. She found 3 more descendants like you. Bloodline connections to trapped soldiers. They're starting to feel the calling, too." He smiled sadly. "You're not the only one marked anymore." Is that supposed to comfort me? No, just the truth. He started walking away, his form flickering. "Go home, Garrett. Rest while you can. The cornfield spirits will find you when they're ready. They always do." He disappeared completely, leaving me alone on the creek bank. The bloodstains had spread past my elbows now. By tomorrow, they'd probably reach my shoulders. The mark was claiming me. turning me into something that existed between the living and the dead. A bridge myself, connecting two worlds that were never meant to touch. I walked back to my car as the sun fully rose over Antietam, but I could already hear them, faint and distant but growing louder every day. The drums from the cornfield, the hymns from Dunker Church, the screams from the East Woods. 10 more battles, 10 more regiments of the damned, and all of them calling my name. I got in my car and started driving south, away from the battlefield. But I knew I'd be back. The connection was too strong now, the blood too deep in my skin. The war had ended in 1865, but for me it was just beginning.